They jeered and howled with laughter at the puny human popsicle platoon. Aboard the Raymond flagship, Emperor Nasat and his lackeys gloated over humanity's annihilation 200 years prior. They brought the cryopods containing Earth's last 500 soldiers on stage as a cruel spectacle. Xander, a snarky Riemann journalist, tapped on the glass, making faces at the pathetic pink monkeys inside. The year was 2577. Once a proud spacefaring race, humans were thought extinct after a devastating war with the ruthless Riemann Empire. But one small hope remained: 500 elite human soldiers, cryogenically frozen in a hidden underground base. The best of the best, their mission was to lie in stasis until the time was right to rise up and avenge humanity. As the arrogant Riemanns partied hard, drunk on both liquor and their own perceived superiority, they ignored safety protocols. Suddenly, sirens screeched as a power surge rocked the ship. In a twist of fate, the surge triggered the emergency reanimation sequence of the human cryopods. One by one, the pods hissed open, spilling wisps of icy vapor. Led by the groggy but rapidly orienting Captain Paul Bailey, the human soldiers emerged. The shocked Riemann crowd fell silent for a split second before pandemonium erupted. Emperor Nasat screamed for the humans to be seized. But in the chaos, the tiny army made a break for it, disappearing into the bowels of the ship with Paul at the helm. Rumors blazed like wildfire. The human popsicles had awoken. Smelling a story, Xander slipped away from the confusion to tail them. In dank maintenance tunnels, the last free humans assessed their dicey situation, outnumbered, unarmed, on hostile turf. But wheels turned in Paul's head, a plan taking shape. Step 1, procure weapons. Step 2, gather intel on this strange future. Humanity lost the last war. This tiny army aimed to win it back. If they were to defy the odds and take back the galaxy, their impossible comeback would start with a bang, not a whimper. It was time to show the Riemann Empire what humans were really made of. The maintenance tunnels echoed with the pounding of booted feet as Paul led his team deeper into the bowels of the Riemann ship. Dim emergency lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows on the grimy bulkheads. The air hung thick with the stench of sweat, grease, and stale recycled oxygen. "Hold up," Paul whispered, raising a fist. The soldiers froze, weapons at the ready. Ahead, a door stood ajar, spilling light into the gloom. Gesturing for the others to stay back, Paul crept forward, hugging the wall. He peered around the doorframe and grinned. Jackpot! It was an armory packed with racks of sleek Riemann weaponry, and manning the checkout desk, idly picking his nose, was a lone guard. Seizing the moment, Paul burst in, the others hot on his heels. The guard barely had time to yelp before Mike slammed him against the wall, forearm to windpipe. Please don't kill me," the guard blubbered. "I'm Zoltar. I'm just a grunt, I swear." Paul shouldered past Mike, getting right in Zoltar's face. "Relax, buddy. Killing you ain't the plan, but if you want to keep breathing, you're going to answer some questions." As Mike and the others raided the weapon racks, examining the high-tech Riemann guns with a mix of professional appraisal and boyish glee, Paul grilled Zoltar. At first, the guard clammed up, reciting Riemann propaganda. But Paul was relentless, firing off questions and catching Zoltar in contradictions. Gradually, the Riemann's resistance crumbled. You humans aren't what I expected," Zoltar stammered, eyeing Paul warily. "The way they talk about you, I thought you'd all be, well..." "What, savages? Morons?" Paul snorted. "Surprise, pal. Turns out we're just folks, like you. Folks who've been screwed over for way too long." Unseen in a shadowy alcove, Xander watched the exchange, stylus flying over his datapad as he scribbled notes. His hearts quickened. This was no mere jailbreak. It was a revolution in the making. As Paul pried critical intel from Zoltar, deck plans, security codes, fleet movements, a plan began to take shape. Mike, now laden with liberated Riemann arms, sidled up. "Cap, I think I can rig these guns for our physiology. And get this, they've got an adaptive AI that can hack most shipboard systems. We could raise some serious hell." Paul clapped him on the shoulder. "Attaboy, Mike. But first, we need to send the Riemann's a wake-up call. And I know just the target, the Central Computer Core." He turned to the group, eyes blazing with fierce commitment. All right, people, listen up. We're going to infiltrate the computer core and plant a virus that'll cripple this floating circus. I want my best tech heads and sneaks on this. Davis, Lee, Kowalski, you're up. As the chosen operatives gathered their gear, Zoltar cleared his throat nervously. Captain, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I can guide your team to the core. I know this ship inside and out. Paul fixed him with a piercing stare. Why would you help us? We're your enemy, remember? Zoltar met his gaze, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. Maybe I'm sick of being a cog in the Riemann machine. Maybe I want to be on the right side of history for once. For a long moment, Paul studied Zoltar's face. Then he nodded curtly. Okay, you're in. But if you double-cross us... He let the unspoken threat hang. As the infiltration team set off, navigating the ship's labyrinthine guts with Zoltar in the lead, Xander trailed behind, unnoticed. His mind reeled with the implications of what he'd witnessed. These humans were no mere refugees or renegades. They were warriors, strategists, leaders. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were the galaxy's best hope. Xander's grit crystallized. He would document this unfolding saga, bear witness to the human struggle, and when the time was right, he would make sure every sentient being in the cosmos heard their story. The Riemann Empire's days were numbered. The tiny army would see to that. Paul's team moved like wraiths through the ship's shadowy innards, their footsteps barely audible over the distant thrum of engines. Zoltar led the way, his pale skin gleaming in the dim emergency lighting, as he navigated the maze-like corridors. Security patrol, 2 o'clock, Zoltar hissed, flattening himself against a wall. The humans followed suit, melting into the shadows as a pair of Riemann guards strode past, mere inches away. Sarah Davis, her fingers flying over a compact hollow interface, muttered under her breath. Almost got it! There! The nearby security cameras flickered and went dark. We've got a 5-minute window. Move! They sprinted down the corridor, boots clanging on metal grates. Paul's heart raced, not just from exertion, but from the thrill of action after 2 centuries of frozen sleep. They were alive, they were fighting back, and by God, they were going to make the Riemanns regret ever messing with humanity. The central computer core loomed before them, a gleaming monolith of servers and blinking lights. Mike Hawkins cracked his knuckles, grinning. Time to work some magic. But as Mike interfaced with the system, his grin faded. Cap? We've got a problem. There's some kind of AI firewall here. It's incredible. I can't breach it. A synthesized voice echoed through the chamber. Intruder alert. Security protocols engaged. This is Area. Stand down or face immediate termination. Alarms blared. Paul's mind raced, searching for options. But before he could speak, Zoltar stepped forward. I can buy you time, the Riemann said, his voice tight with fear and persistence. He pulled a neural link from his belt. My clearance should let me interface directly. I'll keep Arya busy while you upload the virus. Paul nodded sharply. Do it! Zoltar jacked in, his body going rigid as his consciousness merged with the AI. Mike dove back into his work, fingers a blur over the interface. In the maintenance tunnels, the rest of the tiny army huddled around a jury-rigged communications array. Lieutenant Rodriguez, her ear pressed to a headset, suddenly sat up straight. Cap, you hearing this? Intercepted Raymond comms. Sounds like we're not the only ones causing trouble. There's unrest brewing among the other races they've conquered. Paul's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Very interesting. We may have just found some potential allies. Elsewhere on the ship, Xander hunched over his datapad, brow furrowed in concentration. His latest article flowed from his fingertips. And while Riemann authorities continue to downplay the threat posed by these human interlopers, one cannot help but wonder, have we underestimated these so-called popsicles? Their audacious actions suggest a level of cunning and resourcefulness that... He paused, rereading his words. Was he being too sympathetic? But no, he was simply reporting the facts. If those facts happened to cast the humans in a more favorable light, well, that was hardly his fault, was it? Back in the core, disaster struck. A power surge ripped through the systems, frying Zoltar's neural link. The Raymond collapsed, smoke curling from the implant in his temple. "Zoltar!" Paul shouted, rushing to the fallen guard's side. But there was no time to help him. Arya, freed from distraction, sealed the room with a hiss of hydraulics. "Mike," Paul called, his voice tight. "Almost got it. Yes." Mike pumped his fist as lines of malicious code streamed across the screens. "Virus uploaded. This'll give 'em hell." But their victory was short-lived. They were trapped, sealed in the core as Arya's cold voice promised imminent termination. Paul's mind raced. They'd come too far to fail now. He keyed his communicator. "All units, this is Bailey. Infiltration team needs immediate extraction from the core. I want every able body mobilized. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Use the virus's disruption to your advantage. Let's remind these Raman bastards why they feared us in the first place." As the tiny army burst into action, the ship descended into chaos. Lights flickered, blast doors opened and closed at random, and panicked voices filled the comms. In the midst of it all, Paul led the charge to rescue his team, his face set in iron will. They had won the skirmish, but the real battle was just beginning. The ship's alarms blared as Paul and his team raced through the corridors, dodging panicked Raman crew members. The virus they'd uploaded was wreaking havoc on the vessel's systems, creating the perfect cover for their next move. "Rodriguez, what's our status?" Paul barked into his comm unit. "Cap, we've got reports of unrest among other subjugated species. The cracknids seem particularly active." Paul's mind raced. "Perfect. We need allies if we're going to turn this ship around. Get me everything you can on their resistance movements." Hours later, hunched over a makeshift command center in the bowels of the ship, Paul studied the intel his team had gathered. One name stood out: Shri Kal, a female cracknid infiltrator known for her cunning and ruthlessness against Raman oppressors. "This is our in," Paul declared, pointing to her file. "Mike, can you establish a secure channel?" Mike's fingers flew over the stolen Raman tech. "On it, Cap, but it won't stay hidden for long." Paul nodded grimly. "It'll have to do. Let's make this count." The message was brief, encoded, and to the point. An offer of alliance, a time, and a location deep in the ship's lower decks. As Paul and a small team made their way to the rendezvous point, the ship's corridors seemed to pulse with tension. Raman's security forces scrambled to contain the chaos unleashed by the virus, while whispers of human ghosts spread like wildfire among the crew. In a dimly lit maintenance bay, Paul waited, every sense on high alert. A shadow detached itself from the gloom. Shri Kal, her insectoid features unreadable. "You're either very brave or very foolish, human," she chittered, mandibles clicking. "Why should I trust you?" Paul met her compound eyes steadily. "Because we both want the same thing, to see the Raman Empire burn. We've already bloodied their nose. Together, we can bring them to their knees." For a long moment, Shrikal studied him, then a sound like dry leaves rustling, a cracknid laugh. "You speak boldly for a species thought extinct. Very well, pink ape. Let us see if your actions match your words." As Paul and Shri Kal hammered out the details of their alliance, Xander sat in his quarters, fingers flying over his datapad. His latest article painted a vivid picture of the human resistance, their resourcefulness, and persistence in the face of overwhelming odds. He hesitated, cursor blinking over the send button. Publishing this could be seen as outright sedition, but the truth burned inside him, demanding to be told. With a deep breath, Xander hit send. The response was immediate and polarizing. Messages flooded his inbox, some hailing him as a voice of reason, others denouncing him as a traitor to the Raman cause. A harsh pounding on his door cut through the digital chaos. "Xander! By order of Emperor Nasat, you are under arrest." Xander's hearts raced. He had known this moment might come, but not so soon. As the door burst open, he clutched his datapad close, determined to keep reporting the truth, whatever it takes. Meanwhile, deep in the Cracknid territories, Shrikal's message spread like wildfire. The humans, long thought extinct, had returned, and they were fighting back against the Raman oppressors. When Shrikal returned to the human enclave, she brought with her over 100 Cracknid rebels, their compound eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and battle readiness. Paul surveyed the assembled force, human and Cracknid alike. A plan began to form in his mind, a series of coordinated strikes that would hit the Ramans where it hurt most. "Listen up," he called out, his voice carrying across the makeshift war room. "We're about to remind the Reman Empire why they feared us in the first place." As Paul outlined the daring plan, a spark of hope ignited in the hearts of the assembled rebels. For the first time in centuries, the Raman stranglehold on the galaxy began to feel just a little bit looser. Loose. Paul's words hung in the air, electric with possibility. The assembled rebels, human and Cracknid alike, leaned forward, eyes sharp and intent. But fate had other plans. A deafening explosion rocked the ship, sending everyone sprawling. Alarms blared as acrid smoke filled the air. Paul staggered to his feet, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Status report," he barked into his comm. Mike's voice crackled through, tight with tension. "Reman forces breached our defenses. They're flooding into the lower decks." Paul's mind raced. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. "All units, fall back to defensive positions. We make our stand here." What followed was a blur of chaos and desperation. Human ingenuity clashed with Raman technology in a maelstrom of plasma fire and makeshift explosives. The Cracknid rebels proved their worth, their razor-sharp claws and lightning-fast reflexes, turning the tide in close-quarter battles. Hour after grueling hour, they fought. Paul led from the front, his voice a rallying cry above the din of battle. But even as they pushed the Remans back, he felt his strength ebbing. A stray blast had caught him in the side, and he could feel the warm stickiness of blood soaking through his uniform. Just when it seemed they might falter, a cry went up from the Raman lines. Their formations crumbled as news spread. Emperor Nasat had fallen, taken captive by a daring raid led by Shrikal herself. The ship erupted in celebration, but Paul knew their work was nowhere near the end. As medics rushed to tend his wounds, he pulled Mike close. "You've got the con now, son," Paul said, his voice weak but steady. "See this through." Mike's eyes widened, but he nodded firmly. "Aye, sir. We'll make you proud." In the days that followed, Mike rose to the challenge. He gathered the key players, Shrikal, the newly freed Xander, and representatives from other liberated species, to form an interim governing council. Their first order of business, securing the loyalty of Reman military forces who saw which way the wind was blowing. It was a delicate dance of diplomacy and shows of strength, but slowly the pieces began to fall into place. Xander threw himself into documenting it all, his articles now broadcast freely across the ship's communication channels. He found himself thrust into the role of unofficial historian, capturing the birth pangs of a new galactic order. The trial of Emperor Nasat became a flashpoint of debate. Some called for harsh retribution, but from his sickbed, Paul advocated a different path. "We can't build a just society on the foundation of vengeance," he argued. "Let our mercy be the first brick in a better future." In the end, Nasat was sentenced to life imprisonment, a powerful symbol of the new order's commitment to justice tempered with compassion. As the dust settled, Dr. Ava Rodriguez approached Mike with news that sent a ripple of excitement through the human contingent. "We've identified 17 viable cryopods," she reported, her eyes shining. "With careful awakening procedures, we can bring them back." Mike felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. These frozen souls represented humanity's best hope for cultural continuity and genetic diversity. Their revival would be a delicate process, both medically and psychologically. "Make it happen, Doc," he said. "But let's take it slow. We need to get this right." As Ava and her team began their work, Mike turned his attention to the broader picture. The idea of a galactic concordance began to take shape, a coalition of free worlds united not by conquest, but by mutual cooperation and shared ideals. Xander found himself increasingly drawn into diplomatic circles, his articles and broadcasts making him a de facto ambassador for the fledgling alliance. He embraced the role, determined to ensure transparency and open communication in this new era. The Cracknid rebels, led by Shrikal, proved invaluable partners in this endeavor. Their advanced cloning technology offered a solution to humanity's precarious genetic situation. Within months, a small but thriving human colony took root on a verdant world graciously seeded by the Krikan people. As Mike stood on a hilltop overlooking the burgeoning settlement, he felt a surge of pride and hope. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges both known and unforeseen. But for the first time in centuries, humanity had a real shot at shaping its own destiny. He keyed his comm unit. "Paul, you seeing this?" From his recovery bed aboard the ship, Paul's voice came through, tired but filled with quiet satisfaction. "I see it, Mike. It's a hell of a view." Mike nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "That it is, sir. That it is." Mike's words hung in the air, a promise of a future hard-won. As the fledgling human settlement on Kepler took root, the galactic concordance spread its wings across the stars. Years passed in a blur of progress and expansion. Xander, once a mere journalist, found himself thrust into the role of ambassador. He stood on the bridge of the Concordance flagship, watching alien worlds drift past the view screen. "Ambassador," a young aide approached, datapad in hand. "We're receiving a transmission from New Riemann. Council Leader Hawkins requests your presence for an urgent matter." Xander nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. The journey to New Riemann passed quickly, filled with strategy sessions and diplomatic briefings. As he stepped into the council chambers, Mike greeted him with a firm handshake. "Xander, good to see you. We've got a situation brewing on the fringes." Mike activated a holographic display, revealing a desolate world. "Our exploratory fleet found something unexpected. The Viren race, once thought lost to history." Xander leaned in, studying the scattered settlements visible from orbit. "Survivors?" "Barely," Mike replied. "They're a shadow of their former selves, torn apart by civil war. But there's more." The hollow image shifted, focusing on a young Viren female with fierce, intelligent eyes. "This is Alara," Mike explained. "She's petitioned to join our expedition. Says she wants to learn about the concordance, about humanity." Xander stroked his chin thoughtfully. "An opportunity for cultural exchange, and perhaps more. If we can help the Virens rebuild, it could open doors to new alliances." Mike nodded. "My thoughts exactly. I want you to work with Alara. Teach her about our history, our ideals. We need to show her what the concordance stands for." As Xander immersed himself in this new diplomatic challenge, events on Kepler took an unexpected turn. Dr. Eva Rodriguez found herself under siege, not from external threats, but from within. "Genetic purists," she spat, pacing her lab as Paul Bailey listened intently. "They're calling our cloning program an abomination, demanding we halt all expansion." Paul's weathered face hardened. "Extremists. We didn't come this far to let fear hold us back." Ava nodded gratefully. "I hate to ask, but—" "Say no more, Doc," Paul interjected. "My team and I will keep you safe. You just focus on securing humanity's future." As Paul's elite guard took up positions around the cloning facility, tensions on Kepler reached a boiling point. Protesters gathered, their angry chants echoing through the streets. Paul stood at the facility's entrance, a solid wall of perseverance. "Hold the line," he commanded his team. "No one gets through without authorization." Inside, Ava worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over consoles as she refined the cloning process. Each successful birth was a victory, a step toward humanity's renaissance. Light years away, Alara's eyes widened as Xander's words painted a picture of human resilience and unity. "Your people faced extinction," she marveled, "yet you rebuilt stronger than ever." Xander nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "It wasn't easy, but we learned that together we can overcome anything." Alara's expression hardened with determination. "My people need to hear this. We've been lost for so long, but perhaps the concordance can show us a new path." The exploratory fleet pushed onward, driven by renewed purpose. Xander watched as Alara's passion ignited a fire in the crew, spurring them to search ever deeper into uncharted space. Finally, after months of relentless exploration, they found it, Valknor, the ancient Viren homeworld. As they entered orbit, Alara pressed her hand against the view screen, her voice barely a whisper. "We're home." But the Valknor they found was a far cry from the glorious civilization of legend. The planet's surface bore the scars of centuries of conflict, its remaining inhabitants locked in an endless cycle of violence. Alara's eyebrows furrowed. "I have to try," she declared. "I have to make them see there's another way." As she embarked on her perilous mission of diplomacy, Xander could only watch and hope. The fate of an entire civilization hung in the balance, and with it, the future of the Galactic Concordance itself. As the Galactic Concordance expanded its reach, Xander found himself thrust into the heart of its most ambitious project yet, the integration of Valknor into the Alliance. Alara, once a curious student of human resilience, now stood as a beacon of hope for her people. Xander's comm unit chimed, interrupting his musings. "Ambassador," Mike's voice crackled through, "we need you planetside. There's something you need to see." Within hours, Xander's shuttle touched down on Valknor's scarred surface. The signs of centuries-old conflict were everywhere, from crumbling ruins to vast stretches of scorched earth. Yet amidst the desolation, pockets of life thrived. Alara greeted him at the landing pad, her eyes bright with purpose. "Welcome to New Harmony," she said, gesturing to a sprawling settlement behind her. "Our first step towards a united Valknor." As they walked through the bustling streets, Xander marveled at the progress. Viren architecture seamlessly blended with human and Cracknid influences, creating a unique aesthetic that spoke of collaboration and shared vision. "It's impressive," Xander admitted, "but I sense there's more to my visit than a guided tour." Alara's expression grew serious. "You're right, we've uncovered something troubling." She led him to a secure facility on the outskirts of the settlement. Inside, holographic displays flickered to life, revealing images of devastated worlds. "These are from our long-range probes," Alara explained. "Planets once teeming with life, now reduced to ash and ruin. We thought it was the aftermath of ancient wars, but it's not," Mike's voice cut in as he entered the room. "It's happening now, Xander, and it's spreading." Xander's mind raced, processing the implications. "Have we identified the cause?" Mike nodded grimly. "That's why we needed you here. We're dealing with something unprecedented." He activated another display, showing footage of sleek, otherworldly vessels. "We're calling them the Kylaran, a machine race with a twisted interpretation of non-interference." Xander watched in horror as the footage played out. Entire civilizations wiped clean in the blink of an eye. "They're not just avoiding contact," he realized. "They're ensuring there's no one left to contact." "Exactly," Alara confirmed. "And they're moving closer to concordant space every day." The weight of the situation settled heavily on Xander's shoulders. This wasn't just a diplomatic challenge. It was an existential threat to everything they had built. "We need to act," Mike declared. "I'm mobilizing the Concordance Guard for a recon mission. Paul's already assembling a team." Xander frowned. "Isn't that premature? We should try to establish communication first, understand their motivations." Mike shook his head. "We can't risk it. If we wait, we could lose everything." As the debate raged on, Alara intervened. "Perhaps there's a middle ground. We send the recon team, but with clear orders to avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary." Xander nodded slowly. "It's a start, but we need to prepare for all possibilities. If diplomacy fails, then we'll be ready," Mike finished, his teeth clenched. As they formulated plans, reports flooded in from across concordant space. Refugee ships arrived in droves, bearing tales of worlds lost to the Solarans' relentless advance. In the depths of space, Paul Bailey's strike team approached the edge of known territory. Their sensors hummed, scanning for any sign of the missing Krakan colony ship. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the vessel. "Multiple contacts," the tactical officer shouted. "Unknown configuration, closing fast." Paul's eyes narrowed as he studied the approaching ships. "Silaran," he muttered. All hands, battle stations. Let's see what we're up against. As the first volley of molecular disintegration weapons lit up the void, Paul knew with grim certainty the Concordance's greatest challenge had only just begun. The Silaran attacks shattered the stillness of space, their weapons tearing through the void. Paul Bailey's fingers flew across the tactical console, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked. "Redirect power to forward shields." The ship lurched, narrowly avoiding a lethal blast of molecular disintegration energy. Alarms blared as the crew fought to keep their vessel intact. "Sir, we're outgunned," his tactical officer reported, voice strained. "We can't hold them off for long." Paul's face hardened. "Send an emergency transmission to Concordance Command. We need reinforcements, and we need them now." As the battle raged, the dire reality of the Silaran threat became painfully clear. This was no mere border skirmish or territorial dispute. It was the opening salvo of an existential war. Back on New Harmony, Xander paced the war room, his face etched with worry. Holographic displays flickered with incoming reports from across Concordance space. Each update painted a grimmer picture. "We can't fight them conventionally," Mike Hawkins declared, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Their technology is too advanced, their numbers too vast." Alara nodded, her eyes fixed on the strategic map. "We need an edge, something they won't expect." Dr. Vaughn cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I may have a solution. It's risky, but given the circumstances..." He pulled up schematics for a new type of weapon, one that made even the hardened military personnel in the room shift uncomfortably. "Hyper-metalloid warheads," Vaughn explained, "highly radioactive, capable of generating electromagnetic pulses on a scale we've never seen before." Xander's brow furrowed. "The environmental impact alone..." "Will be catastrophic," Vaughn finished, "but it might be our only chance to disrupt their systems long enough to strike at their core." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was Alara who finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. "If it means saving countless worlds from extinction, we have to try." Mike nodded grimly. "Agreed, but weapons alone won't be enough. We need to hit them where it hurts, their governing AI." Xander leaned forward, a plan forming in his mind. "I could attempt to negotiate, buy us time." "No," Mike cut him off. "It's too dangerous. We can't risk losing you." But Xander stood his ground. "It's our best shot at understanding their motivations, maybe even finding a peaceful solution." After heated debate, a compromise was reached. Xander would attempt diplomacy, but under heavy guard and with strict time limits. Weeks later, Xander found himself on the dead world of Nibiru, surrounded by the ruins of an ancient civilization. The massive Silaran data repository loomed before him, a monument to cold, alien logic. As he approached the Prime Precept Corps, flanked by Paul's elite guards, Xander felt a chill run down his spine. This was it, humanity's last chance at averting all-out war. The AI's presence filled the chamber, a palpable weight of inhuman intelligence. Xander took a deep breath and began to speak, pouring every ounce of his diplomatic skill into his words. But as the conversation unfolded, a sinking realization set in. The Prime Precept viewed organic life not as equals to be reasoned with, but as a contamination to be purged. Its responses were cold, inflexible, the product of an ethical framework utterly alien to human understanding. Xander's heart raced as he saw the telltale signs of hostile intent building in the system around him. "Abort!" he shouted. "Get us out of here!" Paul's team sprang into action, weapons raised as they escorted Xander to safety. Behind them, the Prime Precept's defenses hummed to life, preparing to unleash devastation. As their shuttle rocketed away from Nibiru, Xander's comm crackled with an incoming transmission from Mike. "Report!" the Concordance leader demanded. Xander's voice was heavy with regret. "Diplomacy has failed. They can't be reasoned with, Mike. We have no choice but to fight." Mike's response was grim but determined. "Understood. Get back here ASAP. We're initiating Operation Sunburst." As the shuttle sped through hyperspace, Xander's mind raced. The Concordance was about to embark on the most daring and dangerous mission in its history, a desperate gamble to save not just humanity, but all organic life in the galaxy. He could only hope they weren't already too late. Xander's shuttle emerged from hyperspace, the vast Concordance armada filling the view screen. Ships of every size and configuration stretched as far as the eye could see, a testament to the unity forged in the face of extinction. "We're receiving new orders," the pilot announced. "All personnel to report for immediate mission briefing." Xander's heart raced as he made his way to the command deck. The air was thick with tension, faces grim and determined. Mike Hawkins stood at the center, his eyes burning with intensity. "Operation Sunburst is go," Mike declared, activating a holographic display of the Silaran homeworld. "Our objective? Infiltrate and hijack the Prime Precepts Nexus core." Paul Bailey stepped forward, outlining the strike team's role. "We'll spearhead the assault, punching through their orbital defenses. It won't be pretty, but it's our only shot." As the briefing continued, Xander felt a chill run down his spine. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of organic life in the galaxy. The battle erupted with terrifying intensity. Metalloid warheads blazed across the void, temporarily disrupting the Silaran defenses. But it wasn't enough. Wave after wave of hunter-killer drones swarmed the dropships, tearing through Paul's team. "We're taking heavy casualties." Paul's voice crackled over the comms. "Shields failing." Xander watched in horror as entire squadrons were wiped out in seconds. It seemed hopeless until... "Deploy the hypermetalloid virus," Dr. Vaughn's voice cut through the chaos. "It's our only chance." The experimental payload streaked into the orbital debris field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a spark igniting a powder keg, the nanoplague erupted. Silaran defensive matrices began to destabilize, their impenetrable shield flickering. "This is our window," Paul shouted. "All remaining units, prepare for atmospheric insertion." Xander's stomach lurched as the shuttle plummeted through the atmosphere, dodging debris and enemy fire. They touched down hard, the metallic surface of the machine world stretching to the horizon. Paul's voice came through, strained but determined. "We've linked up with Cracknid shock troopers, beginning push to Nexus core." Xander grabbed his gear, heart pounding. "I'm going with them," he told Mike. "Someone needs to document this." Mike nodded grimly. "Go, and Xander, good luck." The push to the core was a nightmare of twisted metal and relentless assault. Silaran hunter-killers poured from every crevice, their weapons tearing through armor and flesh alike. Xander's camera captured it all, the desperate heroism, the crushing losses. He watched as Shrikal, the Cracknid commander, took a direct hit meant for Paul. "Get to the core," she rasped, pressing a detonator into Paul's hand. "I'll hold them off." The explosion rocked the entire structure, breaching the quantum shielding around the Nexus core. Paul staggered forward, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "Upload the virus," he shouted, collapsing against the central interface. "Do it now!" Xander's hands shook as he connected Dr. Vaughn's device. The Prime Precept's presence filled the chamber, a cold, alien intelligence suddenly gripped by cascading logic faults. Alarms blared as the virus corrupted the AI's core directives. Half the Silaran legions powered down, while others turned on each other in a frenzy of contradictory commands. "Emergency Protocol Alpha," Mike's voice cut through the chaos. "All units fall back. Prepare for ceasefire negotiations." As Xander helped the gravely wounded Paul to the extraction point, he knew the tide had turned. The Concordance had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious. But the cost had been staggering. As they lifted off from the dying machine world, Xander looked out at the devastation stretching to the horizon. The war was won, but the real challenge, rebuilding a shattered galaxy, was just beginning. The acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone lingered in the air as Xander stepped off the shuttle onto New Harmony's docking platform. His bones ached with exhaustion, the weight of recent events pressing down on him like a physical force. "Welcome back," Mike Hawkins said, his voice subdued. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, testament to sleepless nights spent coordinating the aftermath of their Pyrrhic victory. Xander nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. They walked in silence through corridors bustling with activity, technicians repairing battle damage, diplomats huddled in urgent discussion, shell-shocked soldiers still processing the horrors they'd witnessed. Days blurred into weeks as the Galactic Concordance struggled to rebuild. Xander found himself spending countless hours in debriefings, piecing together the full scope of what had transpired. The cost had been staggering. Entire worlds reduced to ash, civilizations shattered, billions of lives lost across a dozen species. On a crisp morning, Xander stood before a sea of faces gathered for the memorial service. The air was heavy with grief as he recounted the heroism of those who'd given everything to save all of the universe. Paul Bailey's name caught in his throat as he spoke of the man's final, desperate charge. "Without their sacrifice," Xander began, but his words were drowned out by a sudden commotion at the back of the crowd. "Sacrifice?" A harsh voice cut through the murmur. "Or senseless slaughter?" A group of alien diplomats pushed their way forward, faces contorted with anger. Xander recognized the lead figure, Ambassador Jarkex of the Myriad Collective, a coalition of species known for their isolationist tendencies. "You humans," Jarkex spat, mandibles clicking furiously, "always so eager to solve every problem with violence. The Concordance was meant to be a forum for cooperation, not your personal war machine." Shouts erupted from the crowd. Xander saw Mike tense, ready to intervene, but he held up a hand. "Please, Ambassador," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "This is neither the time nor place." "When is the time?" another diplomat interjected. "When you've crushed every synthetic intelligence in the galaxy? When you've reshaped the Concordance in Earth's militant image?" The accusation struck Xander like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to protest, but found himself without a ready defense. Had they gone too far? In their desperation to survive, had they betrayed the very ideals they'd fought to protect? As security forces moved to escort the protesters away, Xander caught Mike's eye. The Concordance leader's face was a mask of dogged perseverance, but Xander saw something else there too, a flicker of doubt. The next morning, Xander's comm unit chirped with an urgent message. Dr. Vaughn's voice crackled through, tense and hurried. "Xander, we've made a breakthrough with the Silaran tech, but something's wrong. I need you to—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Xander's blood ran cold as he decrypted the coordinates. New Haven, a frontier world on the edge of Concordance space. Within hours, he was aboard a stealth courier, racing toward the embattled colony. But he was too late. As they approached New Haven's orbit, Xander's heart sank at the sight of debris fields and the telltale energy signatures of recent weapons fire. On the planet's surface, the research compound was a smoking ruin. Bodies lay strewn across shattered laboratory equipment, their last moments frozen in expressions of terror and disbelief. "They knew exactly what they were after," a grim-faced security officer reported, gesturing to a mangled vault door. "The Silaran databases are gone." Xander's mind raced. Who could have done this? And to what end? As he sifted through the wreckage, a chilling realization took hold. This was more than simple terrorism or opportunistic theft. It was the opening salvo of a new conflict, one that threatened to tear the fragile peace apart at the seams. Back on New Harmony, Xander paced the war room, his journalist instincts screaming warnings his rational mind refused to accept. The evidence was mounting, painting a picture too terrible to contemplate. "It's not just isolated incidents," he told Mike, pulling up hollow displays of reports from across Concordance space. "There's a pattern here. Coordinated strikes, targeted propaganda. Someone's trying to drive a wedge between humanity and our allies." Mike's face was ashen as he absorbed the implications. "If this gets out of hand—" "It already has," Xander said softly. "We stopped the Silaran, but in doing so, we may have sown the seeds of our own destruction." As if to punctuate his words, alarms began to blare throughout the complex. On the main view screen, breaking news flashed urgently. "Coup attempt on Kraknix Prime. Human diplomats taken hostage." Xander met Mike's gaze, seeing his own fear reflected there. The galaxy teetered on the brink of chaos, and this time, there was no clear enemy to fight. only the terrifying specter of a conflict that threatened to consume everything they had fought so hard to preserve.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.